Quentin Tarantino didn't go to film school. He actually went to films. Growing up devouring VHS tapes and spending hours in video rental stores, he learned the language of cinema not by textbooks, but by instinct, passion, and an encyclopedic memory of genre films most people had forgotten. And when he finally stepped behind the camera, he brought all of that with him, creating movies that didn't just tell stories, but reshaped the ways stories could be told. From the moment Reservoir Dogs hit Sundance in 1992, it was clear Tarantino wasn't just another director. He was a cinematic disruptor. His films are instantly recognizable. They are nonlinear, with shocking bursts of violence, soundtracks that make forgotten tracks feel like anthems, and dialogue so sharp it could draw blood. But beyond the stylistic fireworks, there's something deeper, a constant fascination with justice and revenge, with loyalty and betrayal, with the blurry line between cool and cruel. He's a filmmaker who dares to slow down a scene to let characters ramble about food massages or fast food, only to explode the moment with gunfire seconds later. He builds tension not with spectacle, but with conversation. And in doing so, he's turned hitmen into philosophers, war into theater, and revenge into myth. In this episode, we're diving deep into the Tarantino universe. We'll break down his most iconic films, explore the recurring themes and symbols that tie them together, and look at how his unapologetic love for cinema has transformed pop culture. Whether you're a longtime fan or just Tarantino curious, get ready for a journey through the blood soaked, reference rich, and endlessly fascinating world of a director who made genre cool again and made cool money. So now let's walk through Quentin Tarantino's filmography in timeline order, but not just listing the dates. Instead, we'll try to explore how each film marked an evolution in his style, confidence, and storytelling ambition. Everything starts in 1992 with Reservoir Dogs, and this Tarantino's explosive debut set the tone for everything to come. Non-linear storytelling, witty yet violent dialogue, a retro soundtrack, and a crime story that felt both gritty and theatrical. Made on a tight budget, Reservoir Dogs was a masterclass in tension and economy, and it proved that with the right voice, even a warehouse could become a stage for cinematic greatness. Just 2 years later, Pulp Fiction became a cultural earthquake. Tarantino weaved together multiple narratives with effortless swagger, creating a film that redefined indie cinema and earned him the Palme d'Or at Cannes. This was his coming of age, no longer just a bold newcomer, but a filmmaker who could shape the zeitgeist. Then in 97, often considered his most mature film, Jackie Brown was a departure in tone. Adapting an Elmore Leonard novel, Tarantino traded in hyper-stylized, richer, more soulful. It showcased his love for character depth and storytelling restraint, proof that he could evolve and surprise. Then it came another masterpiece. In between 2003 and 2004 with Kill Bill, Tarantino went full cinephile. These two films are pure genre collaboration: kung fu, samurai epics, spaghetti westerns, and anime. All of that filtered through his singular lens. It was his most ambitious project to date and demonstrated his ability to orchestrate grand, operatic storytelling while still keeping it very personal. The Bride's quest for revenge was brutal, beautiful, and mythic. Then in 2007, as part of the Grindhouse double feature with Robert Rodriguez, Death Proof was a homage to 70s exploitation films. And while it was not a critical darling, it gave Tarantino space to experiment and reminded audiences that he was still a fan at heart, unafraid to get wrong. In 2009 came one of the greatest works to this date, which is Inglourious Basterds. And with this World War II fantasy, Tarantino rewrote history with a flamethrower. Here, he began exploring the idea of cinema as revenge itself. It's also where his skill for tension hit new heights. Just think on that legendary opening scene. Inglourious Basterds marked the start of a more refined, confident era in his work, where spectacle and nuance walk hand in hand. Still rewriting history in 2012 with Django Unchained, Tarantino turned his lens into American slavery, using the spaghetti western format to tell a revenge epic fueled by righteous fury. It was bold, controversial, and packed with operatic flair. With Django, he pushed the boundaries of violence and social commentary further than ever. Then in 2015, a chamber drama disguised as a western, The Hateful Eight was Tarantino at his most theatrical. Shot in 70 millimeters, the film unfolded almost like a play. One location, 8 characters, a storm of secrets and betrayals. It was cold, it was cynical, and it was claustrophobic. An experiment in tension and dialogue that show his love for classic filmmaking techniques. The most to a mastered filmmaker with a legacy of his own. Each film builds on the last, not just in craft, but also in courage. He plays with time, he flips genres inside out, and challenges both audiences and industry conventions. And with every chapter, he reminds us of one thing: cinema is not meant to be safe, it's meant to burn, dance, bleed, and provoke. Tarantino's universe is packed with recurring symbols, brands, and motifs that tie his films together and reward observant viewers. These aren't just Easter eggs, they are part of the connective tissue that makes his body of work feel like a cinematic universe. And here's a breakdown of some of the most iconic recurring symbols in Tarantino's films, along with their deeper meaning and function. For instance, a fictional cigarette brand appears in across Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, For Rooms, and more. Red Apple is Tarantino's version of a product placement, but it's also a wink to the viewer, a sign that we're inside his universe. This brand represents his love for retro Americana and his control over the world he's built, down to the smallest prop. Then there's the Big Kahuna Burger. This fictional Hawaiian burger chain shows up in Pulp Fiction and From Dusk Till Dawn, among others. Like Red Apple, is a symbol of Tarantino's self-contained world. Its most famous moments is when Jules Winfield, Samuel L. Jackson, is biting into one mid-interrogation and delivering the unforgettable line, this is a tasty burger. Tarantino has the trunk shots. The trunk shots are amazing. This is kind of like a low-angle shot from inside a car trunk staring up at characters. And it appears on Reservoir Dogs, on Pulp Fiction, on Jackie Brown, on Kill Bill, and more. It's a perspective that puts the viewer in the role of a victim or the cargo, a very clever trick that adds tension and a unique point of view. Then, of course, there is the recurring theme of the non-linear timelines. It's more like a structural motif rather than a visual one, but it's very essential. Tarantino loves telling the stories out of order, letting tension build through structure rather than action. Think of Pulp Fiction's scrambled narrative or Reservoir Dogs unfolding around a heist we never actually see. Of course, you have pop culture dialogues from conversations about Madonna lyrics in Reservoir Dogs to dissecting hamburgers and food massages in Pulp Fiction. Tarantino's characters talk like real people, obsessed with pop culture, debating the mundane. These dialogues make them relatable and funny, even while they're doing horrifying. Most profoundly, cinema itself becomes a symbol. In Inglourious Basterds, is literally a weapon. Shoshana burns down a theater to destroy the Nazi regime. In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is Salvation, offering Rick Dalton one last shot at relevance. For Tarantino, movies aren't just entertainment. They're powerful, they're dangerous, and they're holy. But perhaps one of the most iconic symbols is a monologue in Tarantino's filmography, and it comes from Pulp Fiction, when Jules Winfield, Samuel L. Jackson, recites a passage from the Bible before executing someone. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. While this quote is attributed to Ezekiel 25:17, it's kind of like largely fictional. Tarantino stitched it together from various biblical sources and cinematic flair. But its power is undeniable. More than just a cool sounding prelude to violence, this passage becomes a symbol of transformation. By the end of the film, Jules reflects on its meaning and sees it not as justification for his actions, but as a call for redemption. And this is classic Tarantino, taking something sacred, remixing it through pop culture, and using it as a vehicle for character depth, irony, and myth. Tarantino is both a product of cinema and a force that has reshaped it. So let's explore now in two parts. First, let's see on the filmmakers and genres that have influenced him, and then how he has influenced an entire generation of directors. Tarantino is famously a cinematic sponge. His films are stitched together from decades of genres, directors, and international styles, yet he makes them feel unmistakably his own. Some of his major influences are spaghetti westerns, of course. One of the influential directors here is Sergio Leone. Tarantino borrowed the tension-filled pacing and the operatic violence of Leone's westerns, especially in Django Unchained and The Hateful Eight. Long stares, standoff, and scores for Ennio Morricone is pure homage. Then you have the black exploitation cinema from Rudy Ray Moore, from Gordon Parks, from Pam Grier. The aesthetics and attitude of the 70s cinema deeply shaped Jackie Brown, his most respectful and character-driven film. The rhythm, the wardrobe, the empowerment themes echo films like Coffee and Foxy Brown. And you have influences from Asian martial art films, from the Shaw Brothers, from Bruce Lee, from Lady Snowblood. Actually, Kill Bill is a love letter to Kung Fu and samurai movies. From the flying choreography to the costume design, the influence is direct and unapologetic. Now, since Pulp Fiction, Tarantino has cast a long shadow. His style became a blueprint and sometimes a trap for aspiring filmmakers. Tarantino make talking cinematic. Directors like Guy Ritchie in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, or Martin McDonagh in Bruges, or Ryan Johnson in Bricks and Knives Out have embraced his rhythm and wit. Then the influence on the non-stream, non-linear storytelling as mainstream, thinking on these scrambled timelines of Pulp Fiction has inspired countless imitations, some of them very thoughtful, some of them purely stylistic. And it helped break the assumption that stories have to be told from A to B. And the use of soundtracks as narrative tools, like particularly using very obscure songs to anchor scenes emotionally and tonally, is now a standard trick. But when Tarantino used that for the first time, it was very revolutionary. For instance, when he used Stuck in the Middle with You with an ear cutting scene, directors like James Gunn in Guardians of the Galaxy or Edgar Wright with Baby Driver owe much to that particular playbook. In summary, Tarantino is a filmmaker who built his career on borrowed parts, but like a DJ, he doesn't just sample, he transforms. And his films are remix tapes of similar history, reassembled into something unmistakably new. In doing so, he opened the door for countless directors to follow his path to be loud, to be stylish, to be referential, and fearless. So let's stop now and talk a little bit about Inglorious Bastards. Inglorious Bastards is a turning point in Tarantino's career. It's exactly where style, substance, revisionist history, and pure cinematic tension all collided into one. And it was one of his most ambitious and layered films. So let's start breaking it down together by key elements to understand fully its significance. In terms of the premise, this movie was set in an alternate version of World War II, and it tells the intersecting stories of a group of Jewish American soldiers hunting Nazis behind enemy lines, a French Jewish cinema owner plotting revenge, and a chillingly eloquent Nazi colonel named Hans Landa. Unlike most of war films, Tarantino doesn't really aim for realism. He aims for poetic justice, achieved through the language and tools of cinema. This movie has several elements that have made it iconic, but one of the greatest is the opening scene. This film begins with a 20-minute dialogue, very heavy, between Hans Landa, the Colonel Hans Landa, and Perrier Lapadite. Hans Landa interrogates this fireman hiding just beneath the floorboards, and it is a masterclass in slow burning suspense, where nothing happens, and yet everything could. Tarantino uses language shifting between English, French, and German, camera placement, and Landa's polite menace to turn a table conversation into a psychological warfare. You're sheltering enemies of the state, aren't you not? It's arguably the greatest opening in Tarantino's filmography. Definitely, we have to refer to Hans Landa, the Jew hunter, played brilliantly by Christoph Waltz. In fact, he won an Oscar for that role. Landa is one of Tarantino's most complex and terrifying villains. Fluent in four languages, he's charming, he's ruthless, and he's addicted to the thrill of control. He isn't just a Nazi caricature. He's a symbol of bureaucratic evil and opportunism. His switch at the end of the film, trying to negotiate his surrender, is a reminder. Monsters don't always wear uniforms. They wear smiles. Shoshana is the counterpart to that story. In Melanie Laurent's Shoshana Dreyfus, she survives the massacre of her family and reinvents herself as a cinema owner in Nazi-occupied Paris. Her plot to burn down a theater full of high-ranking Nazis using nitrate film reels and a propaganda screening is not only poetic justice, it's cinema as a literal weapon. This is the face of Jewish vengeance. Through her, Tarantino turns the screen into an altar of revenge, and her final laugh, projected through smoke and fire, is absolutely mythic. Then there's the Bastards, led by Aldo Rain. They're brutal, they are unapologetic, and they are cartoonishly violent. They carve swastikas into foreheads and beat Nazis with baseball bats. Tarantino uses them as a vehicle for audience catharsis, but they're also part of the film's satire. They parody both the macho war hero and the idea of righteous violence. We're gonna be doing one thing and one thing only: killing Nazis. Tarantino also takes real historical figures like Hitler, like Goebbels, and others and rewrites their fate. The film's climax, when Hitler is gunned down by a in a burning movie theater, is gleefully ahistorical. But that's the point. Tarantino uses film not to record history, but to reimagine it through the lens of justice. In this way, Inglourious Basterds becomes a manifesto. Cinema can do what history didn't. It can avenge. Inglourious Bastard was Tarantino's first true epic. It redefined what a war film could be, made Christoph Waltz an international star, and earned 8 Oscar nominations. More importantly, it marked the start of his obsession with historical revenge fantasy, later expanded in Django Unchained and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now let's talk about the other one. Pulp Fiction is arguably Tarantino's defining film, the one that turned him into a global phenomenon. It didn't just break the rules of narrative cinema, it rewrote them with swagger, violence, and a killer soundtrack. So let's dive deep into what makes Pulp Fiction not only iconic, but revolutionary. Tarantino tells the story out of order with scenes looping, foreshadowing each other, and intersecting unexpectedly. Characters die and then return, events repeat from different perspectives, and everything feels random until it doesn't. And this isn't just a style for style's sake. The structure forces viewers to question cause and consequence, and it reveals character not through plot twists, but through behavior. Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta form one of cinema's most iconic duos. They're hitmen, yes, but they're also friends, comedians, and armchair theologians. You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris? Their conversations about burgers, food massages, and divine intervention give the film its soul. Jules' eventual conversion is the film's moral anchor. In a movie full of violence and absurdity, he seeks meaning. Then there's the diner scene. Pumpkin and Honey Bunny bookend the film with a robbery that plays out like a stage show. Their hold-up scene, interrupted by Jules' cool composure, becomes a moment of unexpected tenderness and restraint. In a world where bullets fly easily, this is the moment when someone chooses not to pull the trigger. Uma Thurman's Mia Wallace is very magnetic. Her dance with Vincent at the Jackrabbit Slims has become cinematic legend. But just beneath the surface is danger. Her heroin overdose scene is one of the film's most chaotic and visceral. Don't you hate that? Uncomfortable silences? She represents both the glamour and the fragility of Tarantino's world, cool, mysterious, and always a moment away from disaster. Bruce Willis plays a boxer, Butch, who's supposed to throw a fight, but he doesn't. His arc could be its own movie betrayal, escape, and an unforgettable moment in a pawn shop basement that dives headfirst into absurd brutality. Zed's dead, baby. Yet Butch's story is about unexpected loyalty, rescuing his enemy because it's the right thing to do. Tarantino saturates Pulp Fiction with pop references from TV pilots to Elvis to fast food. But the real genius is how he places sacred moments next to profane. A philosophical discussion about fate happens in a diner. A Bible verse is quoted before a murder, and a glowing briefcase, never explained, becomes a mystical object of desire. The soundtrack is absolutely beautiful. It defines the music as a mood. Surf rock, soul, and forgotten gems fill the soundtrack. Each track is chosen not for popularity, but for emotional irony or intensity. Misirlou kicks off the film with adrenaline. Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon turns seduction into tragedy. Tarantino made the soundtrack a narrative device. Pulp Fiction won the Palme d'Or, an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, and turned indie filmmaking into mainstream obsession. It revived John Travolta's career, made Samuel L. Jackson a legend, and launched 1,000 imitators. But none could match its mix of grit, charm, chaos, and grace. It also solidified Tarantino's belief dialogue matters as much as action, and sometimes more. He proved that low lives can have rich inner lives, and that a crime story can feel like Shakespeare with a gun. In Pulp Fiction, Tarantino didn't just make a film, he created a universe, one where violence has rhythm, fate has a style, and redemption might come in the form of a diner breakfast. Quentin Tarantino isn't just a director you watch, he's a director you feel. His movies crawl under your skin, take over your senses, and echo in your memory long after the credits roll. You walk away quoting his characters, humming his song choices, replaying his scenes in your head like strange violent dreams. But what makes him endure, what makes his films worth returning to, isn't just the blood or the brilliance, it's the balance. He strikes between chaos and control, between cool detachment and raw emotion, between paying tribute to the films he loves and daring to create something entirely his own. He shows us the art in pulp and the poetry in profanity. He reminds us that even the most absurd, extreme, and stylized worlds can reveal something true about us, about fear, about loyalty, vengeance, justice, or redemption. And in a world increasingly obsessed with formulas and franchises, Tarantino continues to surprise us. He trusts his audience. He dares us to lean in, pay attention, and enjoy the ride. Whether if it's Jules finding peace in a diner, or Shoshana turning a movie theater into a furnace of revenge, or the bride breathing through her pain in the back of a buried coffin, these moments aren't just cinematic, they are iconic. And not because they're loud or violent, but because they're unforgettable. Because they are designed by a director who treats every frame like a punchline, like a brushstroke, or like a bullet. Tarantino doesn't just love movies, he believes in them. So maybe that's why we keep coming back. Because in a Tarantino film, cinema isn't just about entertainment, it's rebellion, it's revenge, it's redemption. And if you haven't watched his work in a while, start again. This time, notice the shot choices. Listen to the silences between the words. Catch the little symbols, the offhand lines, the emotional turns that weren't obvious before. Watch them not just as a fan, but as a detective, as a cinephile, as a witness to a filmmaker who turned his obsessions into a universe. Because Tarantino's movies don't ask for your applause, they ask for your attention. And if you give it, they'll give you something ready in return, a reminder that movies can still shock, still thrill, still mean something. Thank you for joining us on this episode, and we'll see you at the movies. Just don't forget to check the trunk before you drive off.